Elestral's Divine Champions Sunstrike pre-release event start tomorrow. Let's go over everything you need to know to have a successful pre-release event. The schedule for pre-releases starts tomorrow, Friday, May 15th, and runs through Sunday, May 24th. If you're looking to play in a pre-release, make sure to check out play.elestrals.com for a full list of events, and make sure to filter by pre-release in order to find pre-releases in your area. So what is the format? Well, Elestrals does not have a dedicated pre-release product. However, it is recommended to use the starter decks for pre-release events. So for Sunstrike, we now have the return of the double starter decks. These come with 2 starter decks, either the Hera versus Aeolus, or as pictured, the Ares versus Hephaestus double starter decks. These also include 4 packs. Now, the exact format that you will be playing is determined by your local game store, but there will typically be a few different ways that these events may run for you. You could have access to the full double starter deck and all the included packs. Your local game store may choose to do a single starter deck and all 4 packs, so you may be buying the full product, but they may limit you to choosing one of the 2 decks included and then just using the 4 included booster packs to upgrade. And there are some stores that are offering to do a split starter deck, so you will get a single starter deck, splitting it with another person, so they will take the other starter deck out of the box, and then you will each get 2 of the booster packs to upgrade your decks. And always remember that spirit decks can be changed in any form that you like, using any combination of spirits that you like, and your local game store should have a bulk box of spirits to enable you to do so you should not have to bring extra spirits yourself. And like I said, there's multiple different ways, so refer to your local game store to determine the exact format that they will be hosting for their pre-release event. Now let's start talking about the decks. First, let's talk about the Ares deck. The Ares deck has a heavy focus on stadiums, artifacts, and the Nexus mechanic. One thing to look at with the Ares deck is being able to use the Colosseum of Ares, the battlegrounds, and artifacts as Nexus banks to work with your 1-drop champions to search other champions of Ares and add more spirits to board or special ascend. So Ares has a lot of play within its own champions. You have Nebuleo, champion of Ares, to Nexus and search other champions of Ares. You have Lumaru to Nexus and disenchant in order to special ascend. And you also have Kakare, champion of Ares, to add more spirits to board. So look to be using these Nexus mechanics and building up spirits on your stadiums and your artifacts in order to trigger your larger Elestrals effects. Moving on to the Hera deck. Hera focuses on a little bit of a slower gameplay. I believe this deck focuses a little bit more around using the first ascension of the Quackle in the Signectric champion of Hera, looking to set up a little bit more of a control board state and sit on the Signectric until you can ultimately set up your board and your hand in order to meet Imperial, champion of Hera's requirement to return 3 Thunder Spirits from your field to your spirit deck in 1 turn in order to normal cast it. Hephaestus has one of the most structured gameplays and is probably the strongest starter deck out of the box in my opinion. This card features a lot of cards that have already featured in previous sets and is finally coming together in this set. What you'll be looking to do is use the fire artifact strategy with Hephaestus and searching eruptions. So you have 2 of the original eruptions, which can be played as this is a starter deck specific format, so the current ban list does not necessarily apply to it, as well as the new Eruption Hephaestus's Jealousy as a fire counter rune. You want to be getting to these cards in most games, as they will be your big power plays. And it really has a full, complete strategy, as you're able to control the board fairly well, and you're able to swing big with your cards like Vesuvatuga, Champion of Hephaestus, and Krakatuga, Champion of Hephaestus. The 1-drop starters do lack some offensive capabilities by themselves, but look to boost those stats with artifacts or use their effects to ascend themselves into their 2-drop counterparts. And lastly, we have our Aeolus starter deck. So this has been one of the most talked about and potentially feared decks from a competitive standpoint going into this format. It is a really good combo deck, and you're really looking to combo off early with the Stratomoth Champion of Aeolus by way of Aeolus's effect, and using Nimbug Champion of Aeolus and Bag of Winds back in the bag. This deck is not as strong as a fully constructed version of this deck, however, it can be really powerful. After setting up with your Stratomoth, look to follow up with cards like Champ Sorlet and Chrysor for huge damage swings that can potentially end the game on turn 3 or 4, depending if you're going first or second. And so the base deck does lack a little bit of consistency to be able to see all your combo pieces each time, so you may have to choose to mulligan a little bit, or you may need to structure the deck in such a way that you can focus on a little bit other strategies to set up your hand with the right cards to be able to then get your big combo to go off. It is very powerful when you see your cards early, though, so if you do, make sure to go ahead and take those big swings, as that's what this deck really wants to do. So what can we do to upgrade these decks? So like we have talked about, the format is going to be a little bit different. If your local game store is running a event where you get the full starter deck and you can combine both starter decks together as well as using the booster packs, we're gonna see a little bit of a stronger, more competitive constructed level of event. So we will look at additions to each deck from the companion deck in that box, but we will also talk about what cards to be looking for from your booster packs that may give you a slight edge, and what to potentially remove to make those decks just a little bit better, maybe a little bit stronger for you. And remember, in this you can always build out a side deck from those extra cards that you pull in the booster packs. Starting off with Ares, let's look at some additions that can be made from the Hephaestus starter deck. The first card that we could consider is Anvil of Hephaestus, as this does give us a stat boost, as well as plays off of Ares already having its own artifacts in the armaments of Ares. And when an artifact rune is sent to from your field is sent to the underworld, you can enchant each spirit that was enchanting that artifact rune from your underworld to a card on your field. So this lets you keep a lot of those solar spirits that may have been on a spear of piercing or a sword of vitality, and get those spirits back on your board so you can still be doing your Nexus plays and triggering off your effects. We also have runes like Tsunami, Argo because we're on artifacts, Reforge because it is already in the deck, and so another one may not hurt, as another pseudo ambrosia and getting your artifacts back, as well as Gorgon's Gaze. So most of these are going to include combining a lot of the more standard runes packages that are from each to make the back row a little bit stronger. So if you are playing that full double starter deck availability, then do look to combine a lot of these standard counter runes from each deck. Now moving on to what we can look from our booster pack. So from cards that come in common rarity, we could be looking at adding another Lumaru, Champion of Ares, another Kakare, Champion of Ares, or even a Hydrake, as it can search out Dragon Alestrals. So if you happen to pull into, say, a Dragalis, Champion of Ares, this could help you search out and add that to hand. Moving on to our uncommons, we can look at adding a Gardon, Champion of Ares, as this can be searched out with our Armadon, Champion of Ares, and while it's not included in the base starter deck, it is still a Champion of Ares and would combo off nicely with the current deck. Can also look to add another Ruminous, Champion of Ares, as this is a really strong 2-drop card in this deck. So if you want to play a little bit more 2-drop heavy strategy, you could look at adding another Ruminous if pulled. And then as well, we have Dracoray, Champion of Ares. Similar to the Ruminous, is a very strong card. If you have a Hydrake, it could also search this card out. And it's always good to add some more consistent 2-drops if the Dracoray side is what you would like to focus on in your strategy. And then in our rare slots, you can have cards like Helios, Champion of Ares, that unfortunately was not included in the starter deck. The base Heliolith from Daybreak was included. I was really hoping that this card would have been the Heliolith champion in here, but this would be a great one to be able to add if you happen to pull it. You can also have the Dragalis, as it is the other 3-drop Champion of Ares. The Celestia is the main focus of the standard starter deck. However, this is a really good card, and I think would be a really good inclusion in the deck. Could always look to add another Ares, either in its regular holo or full art if you happen to pull it. And an extra inclusion that could be nice to include, which really could slot into any deck, but I think it could be fun to add into Ares, is Ouroboros. And this really helps with some of the stronger Alestrals from your opponents, and really you're only adding in a Lunar Spirit or 2 for this card. And then what should we remove from the Ares deck? I think that any of these cards are potential cuts from the Ares deck. You have cards like Dratora and Exaltus that are here as other cards that play off Nexus. Exaltus does search, but it's only searching ethereal Alestrals, so it's only searching out the Dratora or really the Nebuleo line in the current deck, which can be strong, but I don't know if it's necessarily the strongest. You could potentially look to cut one of the Nebuleo Champion of Ares. While it is a pretty strong effect to search for your other Champions of Ares, as it can grab the Gardon, which can then grab you the Ares. You may not always want to see this card, as I think the Lumaru is a really good 1-drop as well as the Kakare, so you may just want to even those out, and you could always consider cutting the base Nebuleo as well. First Light, I just think it's going to be a little bit inconsistent as it's only at 1 copy, and putting a Solar Alestro on the top of your deck may or may not be the better thing. You may just rather search things out with your Nebuleo Champion of Ares rather than the slower play with First Light. Breeze of Zephyros is not bad, as it does give you a stat buff, but you're already looking to stat buff with your Colosseum, Battlegrounds, and your Spears and Swords. So it may just not necessarily be the best card in here, costing a Wind and a Solar and requiring the Nexus. So if you don't have the spirits set up in the right places, the Nexus may not give you that additional benefit from, say, going on to a Sword of Vitality for even more boost. So I could consider cutting this if you get some better runes. And then Calf Mill as well. It does give you healing, but it is just a slower play, and other decks can be a little fast, so you may want to focus on a little bit faster, stronger strategy. Moving on to Hera, I don't think there's that many cards you would be looking to add to the Hera strategy from the Aeolus deck. We have cards like Tsunami, Poison Tipped Arrow, and Gorgon's Gaze as kind of some of our standard runes that you could be looking to add. You could make the decision if you think there's other ones. I just think these are probably the best things to include. Make sure that the back row is a little bit more shored up. You could always throw in a tornado or two from the Aeolus deck just for a little bit of back row destruction, but you already have thunderstorms, so you may just be okay with the thunderstorms that are already included. Then from our booster packs, from our common lineup, we have Magneros, Champion of Hera, Jolton, Champion of Hera, Zipossum, and Snowaddle, Champion of Hera. Magneros Champion only comes in one copy in the current deck, so I think it's actually a really good include if you can get another, as it can be special cast if you're also returning, if you return a 1-spirit Champion of Hera that's not Magneros from your field to the hand, and then you put all of its spirits back to the spirit deck. So you're special casting this out with another, basically with that same Thunder Spirit. So I think this is a really good one. It really combos off to help play with those returning spirits to spirit deck. Jolton, Champion of Hera, a great searcher for your other Champions of Hera, and if you've already done a return, if you've already returned the Thunder, then you can search out those higher drop 2 and 3 spirit Champions of Hera instead. So this is a great way to make sure that you're getting your Imperial into your hand rather than having to draw it. Zipossum is a great new Thunder Celestial. You're a Thunder heavy deck. There are multiple runes that you're able to set in your back row, and so you can build up your back row yourself and boost his stats, and then be able to ascend into an Electropossum if you also pull one of those, or just get a guy that forces your opponents to not set as much back row without boosting your Zipossum up. And then Snowaddle, Champion of Hera, is kind of that other line of the Champions of Hera that is not focused on in the starter deck, but could be really good if you pull the rest of the line in your booster packs as well. In our uncommon slot, we have the Pangawat, Champion of Hera. Again, this is really good if you're pulling the Imperawat and Snowaddle as well. And then Astrabbit, Champion of Hera, is basically the Galaxy for the Hera deck, and at only one copy in the current deck, adding another one would be really good. For our rares, we've got cards like Electropossum. So if you're pulling Zipossum and Electropossum, I think these are really good includes in a main Thunder deck. Our Imperawat, Champion of Hera. This card might honestly just be better than the Imperial Champion of Hera overall. So if you're pulling this line and able to switch into it, I think it would be a really good include, even if you do it just in the side deck to switch out between the strategies. And then, of course, if you're able to pull any more Champion of Hera Imperials, this is really good because then you won't have to rely on some of your other cards to make sure that you're getting into this, as you should hopefully be drawing into it or just have more opportunities to draw into it. And then what should we cut from the deck? I think this deck could probably be best without the base Magneros, as this is a nexus to foretell and adding Thunder, and then adding Thunder Invoke runes foretold that way to your hand. You're not really looking for much in this deck, so you may not just have those hits in this deck. So it's really kind of a slower, more defensive card, but I think even at a 4 defense, it's not going to really net you too much advantage for its cost. Divine Healing, Hera's strategy has a pretty good way to do healing on its own, and there's some other healing in the deck, so I don't necessarily think you need to use Divine Healing to get spirits specifically back onto your Hera's on field, as Hera's own effect is most likely going to do that itself. Mount Olympus, you could potentially get rid of one of them. You do have a Jolton to search out your Mount Olympus. Stadium Orb may or may not come into play, so it could be something, but I think if you get some better Elestrals, or some of those other runes from the starter decks could go in place of one of these, just to shore up either the Elestral count or the back row. And then Galvenom. Galvenom's just a really expensive card. I think Galvenom's the one that actually pairs pretty well with Divine Healing, since you're expending 3 for its effect, and then you could heal those back with Divine Healing. But I think it's probably best to just get rid of the Galvenom. The Toxion is really good, but the Galvenom is just a little bit of expensive of a card. Moving on to Hephaestus, so we'll be adding cards from the Ares deck for this one. Best cards, all back row really: Pandora's Box, Shield of Achilles, and Altar of Stars, really good adds. And then you've already got 2 Reforge, so you could potentially get a third if you're really going full in on the artifacts and wanting to use Reforge more as your healing rather than Ambrosia. You could consider it there just so you have full copies of it. From our booster packs, really the main common that I would look to add would be the Lutrax, just because it is giving that debuff to all the other non-fire enchanted Elestrals. So you can really sit on this and be defensive while you're setting up the rest of your plays if you're going against really any other deck besides a Hephaestus mirror. In our uncommons, Corvusmith goes really well with the fire artifact strategy, and then Ash Rabbit, Champion of Hestia, is also a consideration, as your fire Elestrals are getting an attack boost from this, and you're getting more fire spirits onto your field, which really helps with some of your other effects to be able to ascend into like the Vesuvatuga with the new Boltuga. So I think this one would be a really good addition if you're able to pull the Ash Rabbit. And then for our rares, Vesuvatuga, Champion of Hephaestus, if you want to get a little bit more consistency, maybe draw that card rather than have to go through the special ascension ways with it. I think any copies of Lavalith, Champion of Hephaestus, goes really well in an artifact heavy strategy, as you're getting the boost from the artifact that you're empowering it with, as well as you're still getting to target and destroy face down runes once that empowerment does happen. And then, since we're on the fire artifacts, getting another copy of the Tongs of Hephaestus. This is just such a great card, such a powerful card that goes so well into fire decks. I would look at getting this. It pairs well with the Reforge, as it's a full Ambrosia and Return of the Tongs. This is almost an auto include if you pull one. And then another Eruption, Hephaestus' Jealousy. Again, this deck might just be an auto include, as you're going to want as many copies of Eruption as you can have in your deck. And then what should we remove? It's hard to say what to actually remove. I think it's going to really depend on what cards you do pull from your booster packs and take from the Ares deck, as this deck really is very sound as it is. I would say probably the weakest card of them all is probably the Rummikul, Champion of Hephaestus, as it returns an artifact rune from your underworld to your hand. I think a Reforge is honestly a better, Reforge is just better than this Rummikul, as you're doing the same thing, except they can't Gorgon's Gaze a Reforge, and you're also getting the healing from it. So I think that card's probably the weakest and probably the most cuttable, but you could also consider the original Rummikul as well, though it does search for your Stadium rune and gets a boost, when the Volcanic Forge is enchanted. However, I do have the Volcanic Forge on this list as well. All these are coming with 2 copies of Stadiums. Getting rid of one is not too bad, and the Rummikul may or may not necessarily be needed, because you're having things like hammer and tongs and all the other artifacts that are already giving boosts. So the extra boost may be nice, but you may not need it, especially because if you load up on artifacts, then that's a lot more potential triggers for your Smoltuga champion to go into the Krakatuga champion. And then depending on if you find some other Tongs of Hephaestus, you could potentially look at cutting the Hammer of Hephaestus or Necklace of Harmonia, just because I think the Tongs are going to be a better artifact. So why not switch them out for one of these? I think the Anvil is probably actually a pretty good one to keep, just because you can return those spirits onto field, which really combo off with the rest of the Hephaestus deck. But these two maybe work a little bit less good with the strategy than another Tongs. Lastly, we'll talk about Aeolus. So again, we're really looking at runes here from the starter decks: Altar of Stars, Shield of Achilles, Gorgon's Gaze, Cryoblast, and Thunderstorm. I think you can really kind of pick and choose what you want to. If you're going to be grabbing from that other starter deck, you're probably just going to grab all of these and either throw them in the side deck or make some changes. I don't see why you wouldn't grab all of these, really. From our booster packs, we'd be looking at potentially another Windjin, Champion of Aeolus, as this is really good when you're playing a very wind card specific deck, as it can get up to -3, -6 on your foretells, which can be really, really good, especially when you're comboing off with other cards, because itself can do that, be put back in hand with the back in the bag, which actually gives it a second trigger, and so it can really just decrease a lot of stats for you. So honestly, a really good card, really good tech card, so consider grabbing a third copy of that. And then we could also look at the Hydrake line here. We're already in Wind. While it doesn't really combo with the rest of the Wind cards, it's not bad if you pull Twindra and Pantera as well, because you're already in a very wind heavy deck. You've got the Wind Spirits for it. You could potentially look at playing this line as well. For our uncommons, we've got Sirikun, Champion of Aeolus, and Twindra. Another copy of Sirikun. This is good just because it gives you another Sirikun to kind of put out as a defensive body, or as another way to get into your Stratamoth, Champion of Aeolus, or even, say, a Chrysaor, Champion of Aeolus. If you're not finding the Sorlets, but you have the Chrysaor. So a second copy of this isn't too bad. Just to give a little bit more consistency to your strategy. And then Twindra as well, being able to attack twice is really nice. And then if you've got the Hydrake and Pantera line, this is actually really nice to include in a Wind deck. And a lot of the best choices for the Aeolus deck come in your rare slot, so you're less likely to see these, but if you do happen to see them, I would really suggest snatching them up. If you find another Stratamoth champion, that's really good. Having two of these is really what you want for the strongest part of this deck. Another Exaltair champ is really good because you're searching out your islands, you're searching out your Aeoluses. I think that's a really good almost auto inclusion. The real auto inclusion is Bag of Winds back in the bag. You find another one of these, immediately put it in your deck, find something to cut. Tornigin, Champion of Aeolus. We don't have the special ascension into it from the Windjin, but this is not a bad card to be finding, and can really be a strong Alestral for you, so consider picking it up. And then of course the Pantera line, if you find it, potentially add it, because it can heal some of those Wind Spirits in this a little bit more costly deck, as well as targeting and destroying cards when the battle phase starts. This Pantera is really, really strong, and most decks aren't going to have a way to out it easily. And then removing from the deck, I think the best three cards to look at removing are the Champion P-Gust and Champion Falocane. I think the other champions of Aeolus are just so much stronger, especially in this deck, that these are not bad Alestrals, but they're just not the strongest and may not really go as well as the other cards included. And then the Galaxir, champion of Aeolus, you're really not wanting to search this card in this deck. You're really wanting to search out your Nimbug champions, so being limited to getting a special cast with it when grabbed by your Aeolus's effect, you're really limiting your plays here, and at only one copy, I think it's best to just remove it from the deck. So with that, let me know in the comments what deck you're going to choose to play. Let me know how your pre-release goes if you're seeing this after the fact. I hope you all are excited for Divine Champions Sunstrike to finally be here, and enjoy your pre-release event, and I hope the best for you.